Jonathan, we want to talk now about the Lord's return. Mm-hmm. That is quite a subject. Eschatology. Why is 10 days related to the Lord's return? What do you think about the Lord's return? What is our calling during these 10 days in preparation for that or in contemplation of that?
Sure, that's a great question, and couple preview points. First of all, it's weird, and I acknowledge that, for a unity movement to have a focus on the Lord's return because it's divisive, and there's all these different theologies out there and different perspectives on everything. Sure. So our perspective on that is simply this, that Jesus is coming back, and we all agree on that.
Sure.
He's returning, and that we need to be ready.
Right, but people have been talking about Jesus coming back forever. I mean, didn't the early disciples think he was coming back?
Sure. I think, it depends on how you read it, but there was definitely been an expectation that he's coming quickly. I mean, that's what he said, I'm coming quickly.
Right.
And so
whether is he coming quickly?
Quickly, as Hebrews said, God doesn't always count time the same way we do. He's not slow, in his timing, even if it seems slow to us. So
are times any different now? Are we in times today that perhaps are the end times? Like, what do you think of that?
Sure. It's hard to say definitively, I think, but I think there are a number of indicators that would show, hey, we are getting into what very well could be the end times. We don't know whether it's 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years. I think in some sense our response needs to be the same to the Lord. But it's definitely very possible that we are. And certain things prophetically are being fulfilled now that haven't been before. And another thing is, if it was the end times when Peter got up and announced, hey, these are the times it's written about in Joel.
Sure.
The end times, the last days. I mean, how much more so 2,000 years later are we in that season? So
we're closer.
We're closer.
But is there something to this phrase, my people will mourn before my return, in terms of timing?
Sure. And that's the phrase I heard, my people will mourn before I return. And it just struck me, it was odd. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, that's not your everyday, God's helping me and he told me something today.
Right. So it puzzled me and it made me wonder. And a lot of times, God is unexpected. He doesn't do things we expect him to do.
Sure.
And he's always the same. His character never changes, but he's always surprising.
Right.
And so with that phrase, I started researching and digging in the Bible, of all places.
It's a loaded comment.
Right.
There's a lot there.
And I think one of the phrases that really spoke to me about this is in Matthew 9, where it talks about how the disciples can't fast right now, or they can't mourn right now, because Jesus is with them. But then when the bridegroom is taken away...
So John's disciples we're talking about.
Right. There'll be this fasting. There'll be this mourning. And so there's this sense of longing for recognizing, like I said earlier, mourning is recognizing what we lack or what we've lost. And we lack having Jesus with us. We know that he's returning, but we don't have him with us now, today. We have the Holy Spirit. And Jesus says, it's better for you that I go away and send you the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That's true.
That's good.
That's a good thing. We're glad we have the Holy Spirit. We affirm that it's better that Jesus did it this way. But at the same time, when we have the Holy Spirit, the Spirit in us, as we read in Romans 8, is groaning and longing for the return of Jesus, for the culmination of all things. So Jesus didn't just send us the Holy Spirit just to leave us that way. He sent us the Holy Spirit in anticipation of his return, and the Holy Spirit in us longs to see that day. So I think that's the big thing. I think a lot of people are living life basically not even thinking about the Lord's return.
Right.
Or if they do, it's more of a fear response, like, oh no, what if I get raptured?
Right.
Or what if I don't get raptured? I know as a kid,
I
had that at times.
What happens?
Where did everybody go? Maybe they got raptured. I would get freaked out, if I couldn't find my all my family members or something.
Sure.
But I think God is inviting us into a response where we begin to long for his return.
So it's appropriate now that Jesus has left to fast and pray
Right.
and long and mourn.
Exactly. And, what does longing do? What does that accomplish?
Right.
What's the point of it?
It's like longing for your sweetheart if you're not with her.
It's exactly the same thing. And in some ways, if you're in love, you can't help but do that.
Right.
I had a long distance relationship with my wife, and before we were married, we were never around each other. And when she was gone, I couldn't help it. All I could think about was her and how I
Sure.
wished that she was there, and how I couldn't wait until we got married. And I'd argue, if it had been different, maybe we shouldn't have gotten married. Maybe something was wrong. And so, since the return of Jesus is compared to a wedding,
Yes.
I think that we ought to consider very strongly, if we're not experiencing that sense of longing and desire,
What's wrong?
what's wrong? Exactly, something's off.
Right.
And so 10 days is a time to enter into that, and not to force it, not to be like, all right, now I'm going to long for Jesus to return, but to open ourselves up to that and say, Lord,
Great.
I recognize in my heart I'm more satisfied with this world as it is than I should be. Can you give me a revelation of the things you want to do so my heart can align with your heart? My desire can align with your desire. So the desire of heaven for Christ to come back can align with the desire of earth, our desire, and we can be in agreement.
Yeah, and isn't it finding like-hearted people?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We'll say more about that. What do you mean?
Meaning, okay, so we know what it means to long for a sweetheart, but who else is longing for the Lord's return? Who else is missing their beloved?
That's a great point.
And can we hang out together?
That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. So in 10 days,
Right.
we're creating an opportunity for those people to meet.
Right. Which is
The
great.
people who
it's like
love
finding your
Jesus.
family
Right.
and your lost ones.
Exactly. So it's sort of it's a call, it's a trumpet call, if you will. Like, hey, meet around this, and then people who carry that desire in them are attracted to that, are drawn together. And that's a beautiful thing when those people come together.
It is.
Definitely.
It is.